We are live and welcome to the SevereMMA UFC 275 preview show as Sean holds up a dirty rag to welcome us in to the podcast or to the show this week. We're here. My name is Ian O'Neill, your host, and I'm joined this week by the usual suspects, Mr. Sean T. Sheen, Mr. Harry Powell, and Mr. E. Spencer Kite, to break down all things UFC 275. I'm really looking forward to that. Before we get into the nitty gritty, let me remind everybody about our sponsors, Eat All Real Nutrition Bars. Head on over to eatallreal.com, enter in the code word Severe MMA, get yourself some delicious protein bars, some peanut butter. They've got it all over there. Support Irish, support real. Eatallreal.com, code word Severe MMA.
Up Limerick.
Up Limerick, up Kilkenny.
My guy.
Let's go. Up UFC 275. Glover Teixeira versus Yuri Prochazka will headline the event in the light heavyweight division. Valentina Shevchenko defends her title against Talia Santos in the co-main event. Zhang Weili, Joanna Jędrzejczyk fighting in a rematch for the ages. We've got a ton of fights to talk about, ton of talking points. Let me set the scene for the main event. Glover Teixeira comes into the UFC in 2012. This mystical figure, Chuck Liddell's training partner. I was a huge fan of Chuck Liddell at the time, so I was excited to see Glover come in. He was representing the pit back in the day. Comes in, runs amok in the light heavyweight division, gets some great wins over Rampage Jackson, Ryan Bader, en route to getting his first title shot against John Jones all the way back in 2014. Was unfortunately defeated against John Jones, lost again to Phil Davis, puts another little bit of a run together. Huge knockout loss to Anthony Johnson in 2016. I was in the building watching that live. It was a very scary knockout, huge uppercut. Soon after that as well, another disappointing defeat to Alexander Gustafsson.
I was in the building for that one.
Nice. Another scary knockout too. Manny would have thought in 2018 at the age of 38 that Glover's day was done when he lost the unanimous decision to Corey Anderson, but no, it wasn't. He got back, picked up some fantastic wins, and in October 2021 he was crowned the oldest first-time champion in UFC history when he beat Jan Blachowicz by rear naked choke in round 2. He comes in against Jiri Prochazka, who himself has been running amok out in and outside the UFC, has fought the who's who of talent in Rise and picking up a title over there with wins over Mo Lawal, CB Dollaway. He has some wins against Vadim Nemkov, to name a few. Comes into the UFC, with a big name, a big history. Picks up a win over Volkan Ozdemir, then picks up a contender for one of the knockouts of the year against Dominic Reyes with a spinning elbow in round 2, which gets him, after just 2 fights in the UFC, a crack at the light heavyweight title. Whew, Spencer. It's that's kind of the background of the story of 2 of these fighters. It's a fight that I am so looking forward to. There's a lot of variables in this. There's a clash of styles. There's the old veteran against the young buck on up and coming buck. And I mean, I'm shaking even after giving that little bit of intro. I'm so excited to see this fight. You must be looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. As soon as it was official and sort of came together after the victory for Teixeira, where, Yuri Prahatka in the building. He's set to be the backup for that fight in case anything goes wrong. So we know right away that's a fight that's going to happen. You start thinking about it. And as we've gotten closer, I was fortunate enough to talk to a couple of coaches about this fight, get their insights. That got me thinking about it even more. That got me more hyped. And now here we are just a couple days away, and I absolutely can't wait. I mean, you said it right. It's both a clash of styles. It's old guard versus new generation. It's a giant question mark to me, and that's the thing that intrigues me the most. Like, as good as Prochazka has looked and as impressive as he's been in 2 fights, I still have a lot of questions. I think everybody still has a lot of questions. And what I like most about fights is getting questions answered and creating new questions and things like that. And so I cannot wait for these two to get in there. I think the first 3 to 5 minutes of this fight are going to be so interesting, just to get some of those initial reads, to get some of those initial ideas about how things are going to play out. And then from there, let's just see how it all unfolds.
Indeed, let's. Sean, to talk a little bit about Yuri Prahatka, I mean, it's not often we see a fighter come in just to fight 2 fights in the UFC and immediately be awarded with a title shot. He had to win those fights, obviously, and he beat some top-level competition along the way. But he's also beaten some good competition outside of the UFC, especially in his run and rising. One guy I failed to mention on the kind of when I started off was Bruno Capollos. I know you're a big fan of him. He didn't just get a win over him; he knocked him out, and he's knocking out a lot of his opponents, and he has like a knockout run now of almost all of his fights over the last 10 or 15 have come by way of a knockout. So Prochazka, he really offers some tricky questions for Glover Teixeira here, and like vice versa as well. Like we said, Glover Teixeira offers some tricky questions for Yuri Prahatka too, and it's a really intriguing clash.
100%. Yeah, on Prochazka as well, and I think you're very, very astute and very correct in what you said about the level of competition he has fought. Like, you look, came into the UFC, he fought Ozdemir, who's always ranked in the top 15, top 10-ish, and then he fought Dominic Reyes, who took John Jones to the limit, who a lot of people, at the time, he went and he lost to Blachowicz, but they thought he was right up there after the John Jones fight, and he went out and he knocked him out with that, spinning back fist. And now light heavyweight, like it's sister weight just under it, isn't the best in the world, but when you have 2 massive knockouts like that, you put yourself on the map. And his other wins outside of the UFC, you could say like he was the best fighter in Rising at the time, right? The best fighter in PFL, in my opinion, is Bruno Capollos, and he beat him, as you mentioned, 83 seconds into the first round. Who's the best fighter in Bellator? A lot of people probably would say Vadim Nemkov, wouldn't they? And he not only beat Vadim Nemkov, he destroyed Vadim Nemkov. He beat Vadim Nemkov so much he couldn't get up for the second round. He was lying on the ground. I watched the fight earlier this week. He was lying on the ground and couldn't get back up. Now, if you want to talk about levels, you want to talk about the level of a guy, maybe we've only, some people have only seen 2 of his fights inside the UFC. He's had 32 fights, is it? 33 fights. 32 fights. Yeah, my math is bad. In MMA, and lots of them have been against top level guys outside of the UFC, and obviously too inside the UFC. So that level kind of has been shown. There are certain things, like with all fighters who, as you very correctly pointed out, Ian, he's on a knockout run. When you do go on a knockout run, there are certain things at a certain level you actually can't prove. It was always the issue with Conor McGregor. It's like, can he go long? Does he have the cardio? Does he have this, and this? And, in some fights he showed he didn't, in other fights he showed he did. And it's not just Conor McGregor, it's Junior Dos Santos coming up, or whoever it might be. So there are a couple of things, and I'm sure we'll get into the breakdown of the fights here and see a couple of things that Yuri Prahatka could be questioned on. But one thing I think, you asked maybe kind of what's special about him. My favorite word in MMA for greatness is variety. And I think he is a brilliantly varied fighter, and not just varied in like he throws loads of different stuff and something might land. I think he's very intelligent with it. His offense is to me, it's just so hurtful, but not hurtful in like he'll punch you and it'll hurt you kind of way. Obviously it is that way, but it just hurts every part of your game when you're fighting him. I always talked about Robert Whittaker against Yoel Romero. I think Robert Whittaker won those 10 rounds against Yoel Romero because he broke his rhythm by just throwing so many shots and having varied looks at him, and he couldn't land a strike on him. That's the type of thing Yuri Prahatka does to fighters. He just breaks their rhythm. He breaks their game plan just by being a non-stop fighter. Now, that non-stop fighter is a great fighter for 1 round. He's a great fighter for 2 rounds. Is he a great fighter for 3, 4, 5 rounds when you're in there against the most battle-tested guy he'll probably ever meet in his career, in Glover Teixeira, who can fight, who can wrestle, who can box, who can kickbox, who has good jiu-jitsu, who can do it all? That's a big question coming in here. Can he knock him out in the first 2 rounds? Maybe, but
it is. I mean, it's the perfect the way you described it is Glover is perfect there, and it describes, I think, the perfect test at the perfect time for Yuri Prahatka too, coming in against a guy like Glover Teixeira, who's battle hardened, who has experience in championship level fights, who's been beaten the who's who. You know, and I also like the way you mentioned kind of Prahatka's unorthodox nature inside the cage, but his nature outside the cage couldn't be any more opposite. Very mindful, very spiritual. He's out in the woods. He's training in isolation over in the Czech Republic, and you know, getting some refined training in there. And looking at those aspects for me is what, you know, makes me interested in seeing his progression as a fighter. He looks like a very unique individual, a very unique fighter. But all that mindfulness, all that calmness, once that octagon cage door closes, it goes well out the window, doesn't it, Harry? He is a wild man when he gets in there. And sometimes it can be to his detriment as well.
Imagine if Tony Ferguson had knockout power. That's a bit of the Yuri Prahatka, right? Tony Ferguson says, and has said for the longest time, and opponents of Tony Ferguson have said, he's difficult to prepare for because even Tony doesn't know what he's going to throw until he gets in there. And I think the mindfulness and the spirituality and all these sorts of things we talk about they're not a dichotomy. They are a direct link. The direct link, when that cage door closes, Prahatka is able to just get into a different level of flow state than other fighters are. And he throws what he feels. He doesn't think about it. He just throws what he feels. Now, as sort of everyone's already pointed out, that can be an amazing skill. It produced some crazy knockouts and some crazy finishes over some crazy names. But I think it can also be to a detriment. And Spencer sort of summed it up that the first 3 to 5 minutes of this fight is very, very pivotal to me. When you're throwing big overhand rights or spinning attacks or whatever, what's available? Your hips are, right? Now, he's clearly a very good athlete. Glover Teixeira is not a bad athlete himself, albeit, you know, nearly 75 years old. But I think that Prahatka has to be very, very careful as to how he approaches the wildness in this fight. Because he could just go out and he could just blow him away. That is an absolute possibility. It really is. It's also a possibility that he goes out, gets clipped with a massive left hand like Jan did, starts wobbling, and he's on the mat inside a rear naked choke or a head and arm triangle within 15 seconds, right? The questions I have coming into this, the big questions I have from an analysis point of view is, can Glover weather the storm, as Sean pointed out? But equally, can Glover get to him with straight shots, impactful shots that will, in some fashion, make Yuri slightly more wary of throwing the crazy spinning attacks? And if he does throw them, how quickly can Glover punish him with grappling? I think that it's going to be a tough task for Glover to try and out-athlete him, outspeed him. I actually don't think either of those things are possible. But what he can do is out-footwork him and start to close the cage off. If he does that, we're going to see what Yuri Prahatka's like when that happens. When his back is more up against the fence and he's feeling a little bit more pressure. What happens when he has to explode out of things and explode into range? I think those are when we can see Glover's opportunities to counter. But if I'm Glover Teixeira's coach, I'm asking him to grapple early and often in the first 2 rounds. Try and take some of the gas tank away. Try and fill up the arms with some lactic acid. And then, as Sean said, let's see. Let's see what he's like in rounds 3, 4, and 5.
Indeed. I think that's the perfect way. You've got to get Yuri Prahatka uncomfortable. You got to take away his confidence, and you got to get him out of his rhythm as well, because when he finds his rhythm, he is almost unstoppable. And we've seen that in the Ozdemir fight. We've seen it in the Reyes fight as well. You know, this is his first fight in the UFC. He's coming in against Volkan Ozdemir, and he's just throwing shapes and everything in the octagon in between what strikes he's going to throw. I think sometimes, from me looking and from the outside in, I don't even think that Yuri Prahatka knows what strike he's going to throw next. So you can imagine what it's like for somebody standing across the way from him as well. With Glover, you know, I feel that he's good everywhere, but not great anywhere. You know what I mean? He does the simple things so well. He's got solid wrestling, he's got solid boxing, he's got great jiu-jitsu as well. I mean, but none of them overshine one another, and he just seems to do the simple things correctly. We don't really too much. Go ahead, Sean.
Well, no, sorry, but I would disagree. I think Glover Teixeira is a great wrestler. I really do, and I think he's the most underrated wrestler in the history of our lovely sport. I think he's fantastic. But I think an interesting part of this, and if we can interrupt the comment there from Carol Jan, I think it's a very, very interesting one about the amount of strikes that Yuri actually absorbs. And we've all said it without saying it here, if you want to put it that way. There is, I mentioned it, you know, the Robert Whittaker Yoel Romero fight, and why Yoel Romero wasn't able to land shots in that fight. I was saying he broke his rhythm, but Yoel needs to boom, right? And he needs a second to think about it to throw his shots. And Robert Whittaker didn't give him that second. But Prahatka does give people that second. He stands there sometimes. You know, I think it was used that said there, he doesn't know what he's going to throw himself. I feel like sometimes he's standing there, he's after throwing this, and this. He takes a breath for a second and he goes, right, what am I going to throw next? And when he's doing that, he just stands there with his hands fucking down, right in the middle of the cage, with Volkan Ozdemir or Dominic Reyes in front of him. I'll tell you what, if Glover Teixeira is the one in front of him, he has realized that's something he does. And he goes in there, as Harry alluded to earlier on, and Spencer said as well, throws those straight shots right down through the middle and lands them. They're vicious shots and could absolutely knock him out. Like, this is a fight where I think, I won't speak for the other lads, but I would say, I think Spencer said it, in the first 5, 8, 10 minutes, it's going to be a Prahatka fight, possibly. But that could quickly turn to a Glover Teixeira fight if he attacks him there. Can I ask just one question to all of you, maybe even throw it back to you, Ian, to ask you this, and Harry, and all of you as well, but what do you think Glover Teixeira actually does? Like, what's Glover's game plan? We all said kind of weather the storm, but how does he weather the storm? Does he weather the storm by being very defensive? Does he weather the storm by attacking with those shots? Does he weather the storm by wrestling? What do you reckon?
I think, you know, I probably contradict myself. When I say good everywhere, he's great everywhere and doesn't maybe excel in a lot of things. One thing that he does do well is he does defend well. He does cover up well to attacks, except he leaves himself open for uppercuts, which he's been caught with before as well. But any kind of hook attack, straight punch attack, he seems to be able to quell. If he does get hurt, he does have the wrestling and the takedown in his back pocket, which is an advantage, I feel, in this fight for him as well. What he needs to do is what Harry said, is he needs to close the distance within the first minute, get Yuri up against the cage, make life difficult for him, force him to grapple, force him to clinch, tire out the arms, break his rhythm, frustrate him. And, you know, maybe that will, you know, once Prahatka kind of gets a little bit frustrated, over aggressive, that might leave up some openings for either to take down, or Glover loves to throw a straight right hand and follow it with the left hook. That's his go-to. He's hurting many a guys with that combination. So, I mean, for me, what Glover needs to do here early, he needs to close the distance. He cannot stand off and get into striking exchanges early with Yuri Prahatka here, because I think Prahatka will catch him with something wild. So I think you're all the way out, or you're going all the way in, and you're closing the distance and you're putting them up against the cage.
I think you're right in one, but I also think early Prahatka will be very difficult. Not only, you know, everyone's difficult to take down early, but I think Prahatka against the cage is very strong as well early. And, you know, you say all the way out or all the way in.
But if you're,
I'd nearly choose all the way out.
If he's getting to the cage, okay, and he is getting out, you know what? He's exerting energy though, and if Glover can stay playing that game and bring him into the later stages, that will benefit him in rounds 3, 4, and 5. But easier said than done.
But also, you look at Yuri's spinning elbows as well from there. So Harry, what do you think?
Very dangerous too.
So I will chuck it over to Spencer to give his thoughts, because they'll almost certainly be articulate and useful. But to me, you have to be shooting in the middle of the cage, right? One of the things that I think is really pivotal in the Joanna Jędrzejczyk Weili Zhang fight, that's going to be even more pivotal in this one, is if you're getting into clinch exchanges, Glover has to be the man in the dominant position before he exits the clinch. He has to make sure that Yuri Prahatka is defensively minded in the clinch before he exits. If he allows Yuri, knowing that Yuri's not going to want to clinch, he's going to want to be out in the open, he's going to want to have his space, he's going to want to strike, he has to ensure that Yuri Prahatka is not in the dominant position in the clinch. Because if he is, we're going to see spinning elbows, we're going to see uppercuts, we're going to see knees, we're going to see damaging shots that Glover doesn't need to be in the way of. Now,
how do you assert your dominance in that clinch, Harry? What should Glover be looking to do in that position?
So Glover needs head position. So his head position needs to be on, his forehead needs to be on the chin of Yuri Prahatka. He needs to have his hips either in line or slightly under the hips of Yuri Prahatka. And he needs to have dominant underhooks. From those positions, he can look to disrupt the gravity and the base of Yuri Prahatka either by picking a hip and bowling him over it, or stepping through the middle of Yuri's legs, disrupting the gravity in between his legs. To be honest, I agree with you completely that the clinch is a fine position dependent on how he plays the clinch. If he plays the clinch smart, he can definitely wear out Yuri there. But if it's me, I'm shooting in open space and I'm shooting when Yuri's coming at me. I'm ducking under shots, I'm ducking under spinning attacks. And if I can, the back body lock is going to be my absolute best friend in this fight. I don't care about elbows coming from the back because I'll trip him as soon as he throws them. I don't care about Granby's. I can follow his hips and we can end up in side control. I don't want to be in a front headlock situation with Yuri Prahatka. He's going to land elbows on me. He might knee my body. He might do any fucking sorts of crazy shit. I want to be at that guy's hips early, often, and with as much space for me to exit if I need to as possible.
Harry, have you seen anything in Yuri Prahatka's game that would suggest that if he does get taken down, that he has the ability to scramble and get back up? Because that's exactly what he's going to need to do in this fight.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you don't fight fighters like Vadim Nemkov. You don't fight fighters like Mo Lawal without having an ability to, one, keep yourself on your feet, but secondly, to get back up if you do get on your feet, right? I think Glover has a bit different type of grappling, a different type of strength. You look at the way that he bowled Jan Blachowicz over, who, bearing in mind, is a jiu-jitsu black belt, is no mug on the ground. Okay, it's an MMA black belt, fine. But he's no mug on the ground. He's able to get back to his feet if he needs to. And he absolutely fucking tore through him. Granted, Blachowicz was hurt at the time, fine. But I don't think Yuri is a mug on the ground, and I expect he has some very interesting get-ups and some very interesting, useful, but probably strange techniques in order to off-balance somebody like Glover. I wouldn't be surprised if the curtains match the drapes, as they say, right? The striking, the weirdness in the striking matches the same weirdness when it hits the ground. I don't think we've seen a ton of it when it gets there, but I bet you there's something in there.
Exactly. I'd be very interested to see if the curtain matched the drapes with Yuri Prahatka's hairstyle anyway. Spencer,
come on, Yuri.
Spencer, round us up. Unless you have something else to say, Sean,
I do. Try to Spencer first, though, but
help us out here, Spencer. What kind of digest what we've been saying so far?
So all the stuff that Harry said echoes what I heard and what I put together in talking to Eric Nixick, Tyson Chartier, and Saif Saud, right? 3 brilliant coaches that I tasked them with breaking down this fight. Give me your insights. If you're in these corners, what is it going to be? So Eric Nixick said exactly what Harry said about those offbeat moments coming out of the clinch. He's going to be throwing stuff in those spots where in the gym, you don't train those moments. That's the moment where you break and you fix your shin guard and, you adjust things and then you get back after it. You need to expect that he's not going to let you adjust anything. And so, as Harry said, Glover needs to be out front. He needs to be the one in control. He needs to be the one dictating that we're breaking here and able to get out of space. The spinning attacks and takedowns into space is what Tyson Chartier pointed out. For Glover to be successful, all of those big movements, all of those big attacks create opportunities if you can see them coming, if you can deal with them properly, to get underneath, to get inside, to get chest to chest, and put him on the canvas. And then the thing that we kind of seem to forget a little bit or maybe move past at times with Glover is the dude can box, right? Like he came into the UFC and was slinging hands and was knocking fools out and wasn't using his wrestling that much and wasn't using his grappling that much. And so if Yuri comes out there all wild and he sees some opportunities to throw a big shot, he still has the power in his hands to put him down. This could be, as Andy said, done in one for Glover Teixeira. The last thing I will say is, as Harry put it, Glover Teixeira, 75 years old man, 363 days younger than me. Thanks, bud.
Nice.
Love you.
Yeah, very well said, Spencer. And about the boxing of Glover, very Bobby and Weavy, Mike Tyson-esque as such, where he likes to bob and weave forward, very sound defensively, like I mentioned before. Sean, round us up on this fight before we move on to the co-main event.
I will. One thing that Harry said there, and I've been thinking about this all week, and I actually kind of slightly disagree with his point that he needs to time the takedowns, right? And I've said this a couple of times now, right? But I think he needs to time the takedowns well, like in the rounds, or time it well in the fight. Not necessarily. You mentioned Tony Ferguson earlier on, right? If you time something against Tony Ferguson and do it lovely, technically, beautifully, he's probably going to catch you with a fucking flying knee. Or remember, what's his name? Hindenburg against Eddie Wineland. Remember that spinning attack that he hit him with and knocked him out with? Well, that you get knocked out with that because there's one lad fighting orthodox and there's another lad being a mad cunt. And that is why I think, like, if Glover Teixeira sets up and goes for a lovely timed takedown in the first couple of rounds, I just think it puts him in a dangerous position. I like takedowns in the wild, if you want to put it that way. I like shots in the wild, but Glover's going to have to be very, very, very careful. I mentioned him on the podcast during the week. I think he needs to be brave, but I think he needs to pick those shots where he needs to be brave early. And I really think he can have massive success if he can do that well. If he doesn't do that well, he'll either get knocked out in the first two rounds or lose the first two rounds. We can talk about 3, 4, and 5 after that. But those first two rounds, to me, are technically fucking fascinating. And I 100% agree as well, though, with the point, take him down against the cage. First of all, that's where you should take everyone down if you're a wrestler like Glover Teixeira. Secondly, that's where you should take Yuri Prahatka down. And thirdly, Glover Teixeira's wrestling is designed to get takedowns in the middle of the cage.
Indeed, it is. And, you know, being aware of those situations is something that Glover is very good at as well. He's in-fight decision-making. His fight IQ is next to none. But fuck, after fighting for 20 years, why wouldn't it be? So a very, very exciting, interesting main event at UFC 275. Glover Teixeira defending his title against Yuri Prochazka. As we move from the light heavyweight division to the women's flyweight division, and Valentina Shevchenko will defend her title once more against Talia Santos. Shevchenko, was all the bridesmaid and never the bride in the 135-pound division. Came close against Amanda Nunes on a couple of occasions. I know I was down in Edmonton for that second fight. A lot of people thought, like you mentioned in your podcast earlier this week on your Keyboard Kimura, Spencer, a lot of people thought that Shevchenko beat Nunes on that night. It was a super close fight. She didn't get the nod on the judges' scorecard. She moved up and she's created a fantastic run in the it was a newly formed women's flyweight division at the time. They created it for Shevchenko, and I, for one, I'm so glad that the UFC did that to give her time to shine and for her to become the champion that she really deserves to be. But Spencer, I'll go to you first. She's a phenomenal athlete, a phenomenal person, and a phenomenal fighter overall, isn't she?
For me, she's the most complete fighter in the UFC. And there are a few other people in the running for that, but I think she's the top of that list. And it's for myriad reasons. Harry will expound on it later, but the fluidity with which she does everything and the way that she transitions between all phases is second to none. The other thing that came up when I did the coaching conversation for this fight that all three guys again said is, like, the way she approaches things is what sets her apart. This isn't somebody that just does camps. This isn't somebody that has 57 other things on the go outside of fighting. Yep, she shoots guns. Yep, they travel around. Yep, she looks good in a dress. She does some dancing, all of this stuff, enjoys going on around the world and eating good food. But the constant in all of it is her sister, and their coach, Pavel Fedotov, are always together, and they are always training. And they go get new looks and different looks all over the place. And the training and preparing for fights and being in shape and ready to go and getting better is always paramount to everything. And that just is so hard to deal with when you're anybody else, when she is as skilled as she is, when she is as talented as she is and as smart as she is and conditioned as she is. It just sets her so far apart. Like, I think we have this idea that the flyweight division isn't that good, and that's why Valentina Shevchenko has been as dominant as she is. But I don't think that's the case. I know I said it Monday on my podcast. I think she is just that good. Like, she is just in that tier above everybody else, or maybe even 2 tiers above everybody else. And it's because of her, not because they're not good enough. She's not one of these fighters that's going to have a banana skin moment where she goes out and just, doesn't turn up. She's not going to have the Amanda Nunes, Juliana Pena fight where she just has 5 minutes energy and then she's no good and she gets beat and she shouldn't get beat and it looks ridiculous. That's not going to happen. If you're going to beat her, you have to have the best night of your life for 25 minutes.
Indeed. And it was the biggest variable for me coming into this fight was, I think of dominant champions and you wonder when does it slip? We've seen it with Amanda Nunes. We've seen it with many fighters in the past where it just slips. And it might not be a dip in skills, but it's a dip in mentality. But Valentina Shevchenko has shown a rock solid mentality. Like Spencer said, she immerses herself in training. She's over there training in the mountains. She's getting accustomed early. She looks in phenomenal shape. And I really think Talia Santos, like many of the women that Valentina Shevchenko has faced so far in the flyweight division, has a super tough task ahead of her on Saturday night.
Yeah, my analysis for this fight is twofold. One, when I grow up, I'd like to be Valentina Shevchenko. That's my first bit of analysis. My second bit is how fucking shit must it be to be Antonina Shevchenko? Just getting bet all over the place, literally day in, day out. I'd wake up every morning and be like, why do I do this shit? Like, why do I do this shit? But no, anyway. Shawnee said previously that one of the things he looks for in a fighter is variety. Right. Well, I'm going to slightly change that word and I'm going to say the thing that I really look for is an ability to transition between the phases of fighting, whether that be what we talked about, from clinching to striking outside of the clinch, to regaining range, to fighting at whatever range it is. Her ability to look for mat returns, whether they're conventional mat returns or inside clinch trips or judo throws or whatever, she has an absolutely complete game. The striking is rudimentary in the way that it looks, but the levels of traps that she's setting, even I can't begin to comprehend, and I don't think anyone that's not a fighter can comprehend. Probably even the women in her division aren't able to comprehend it. That's why lads and lasses are getting kicked in the head like plenty of times, right? So she absolutely is the tiers above that Spencer has said. Her footwork, her ability to cut the cage off, her ability to make her opponents misstep, her ability to land straight shots. When she gets it to the mat, the way that she finds her way to the crucifix is second to none. And I think the crucifix is a really underutilized position in MMA. It is impossible to look after your face. It's impossible to intelligently defend. It just doesn't exist, right? So what do? You look at the ref or you're smashing a lady with elbows and you're like, what are we going to do, lads? What are we going to do? So I think for Talia Santos, the way that you beat Valentina, by the way, and there is a way, and there is a clear-cut way, you have to be 70% of the way as technical as she is, so you don't just get mauled immediately, and then you need one hitter-quitter power. That's what you need. Because it's not like Valentina doesn't get hit. She does. She doesn't get hit hard. She doesn't get clipped hard. But we saw in a Nunes fight, in the Joanna Jędrzejczyk fight, in the Jennifer Maia fight even, she gets hit. This is MMA. It's impossible to not. If you've got one hitter-quitter power, you can put her away. Talia Santos does not have one hitter-quitter power.
Yeah, indeed. Sean?
it was funny. I just heard, I was looking down there, fucking Andy Stevenson texting me, distracting me, but I looked up and I heard Harry waxing lyrical about the crucifix. And I recorded my betting show about 2 or 3 hours ago. And my big prediction on that was Valentina Shevchenko is going to win this fight.
You're a good man.
Crucifix. That is the way this fight is going to go. Because there's one thing I always see with Valentina Shevchenko, and Harry made my point that I make that I luckily made with actually great analysis there. He talks about you need to be 70% as good an athlete, right? So I go, when it's someone I know very well, like a Valentina Shevchenko or a McGregor or a Nunes or a Habib, I don't need to watch much of their fights, right? If it's Talia Santos, even a Yuri Prahatka or someone else on the way up, I go watch 3 or 4 of those fights, watch their fights, and then I'll go back and I'll know what kind of fighter they are, and I'll watch a couple of fights of Valentina or Amanda or whoever it might be, to analyze what they'll be like against that sort of fighter. And what I did, it's happened to me now a couple of times with Shevchenko, but it happens to other fighters as well. You watch Talia Santos versus this lady, and okay, she's good at this. And then you go and you watch Valentina Shevchenko and you just go, what the fuck did I do that for? She's just on she's like another species. Like, she's just another level, just so much quicker, just so much powerful. And you look at, Harry made a good point there. She doesn't have the one hitter quitter power. You look at, I think her straight right hand down through the middle is very good and is powerful. But you look at Valentina Shevchenko landing shots, and she isn't a big knockout artist either by any means, especially at this level. And it's just different. It's just different. It is just different. It's like when you watch, Liverpool and then you watch Man United. It's sickens me to say it, but it's like that. It's just a different level. And the funny thing is, Spencer mentioned Valentina Shevchenko's coach there. It's the first time I've ever heard that name. Ever. And that to me is one of those things. Sometimes when there's something wrong with a fighter, you hear their coach's name. I love when I hear that. I love it. Like, Spencer obviously is the type of guy who go and look at that and make those people who we don't know about known. But I love not knowing that sort of thing, because sometimes we don't fucking need to know it. We just need to look at her and see what her fucking greatness looks like, and it's very, very evident. Especially when you watch someone like Santos, who's a good fighter, 19-1. And I think that's a big thing as well. She doesn't know how to lose. And that might be a factor coming into this fight. She doesn't know how to lose much anyway.
She's going to find out.
She's very good. And one last point, just before I throw it over to you, Ian, and go to Spencer. That was it Mara Borello fight that she lost, that fight. If you go watch that fight, it's very hard to see her winning this fight, because she got beat in the clinch. She got beat on the ground. She was just so much stronger than her. And if this fight goes into a clinch, she is getting... Do you remember Cian Lynch in the All-Ireland final last year, Ian, when he fucking judo through your man and put him on his neck? That's what it's going to be looking like here. And she'll probably be going home with the belt like Cian Lynch did as well.
That's it. And that's likely the crux of this co-main event. I mean, Spencer, it's kind of a two-pronged approach to this kind of next way I want to go about this conversation is, while it's amazing to see one of the greatest fighters of all time go and win titles and perform and stay defending. But it comes to a stage where the division gets stale as well. And we're starting to wonder what's next for Valentina Shevchenko. And we have to consider, and we've heard her talking recently about it herself, about maybe making the jump up and going back to 135. It's something. Do you think it's something that needs to be done? Do you think if she does that and she goes on to win a title, I would have to say, in my opinion, she could probably go down as the greatest fighter of all time, women's fighter of all time. I mean, where do you see her and where she stands in the first the 125 pound division, and then maybe the 135 pound division afterwards?
So I think the fact that she's bringing up 35 tells you, is sort of a tell to what's happening, right? When she first got down there, all the questions were, do you want that fight with Amanda? Do you want that fight with Amanda? And she said, I just want to win this title and defend this title and keep fighting whoever's next. Just bring me the next woman. I want to defend my belt. I want to get these rubies on my belt. And away we go. As soon as she gets through 5 title defenses, 6 title defenses now, that's when it comes out. Well, Juliana's got the belt now, and there's Amanda, and 35 looks doable again. Not that it wasn't before, right? Those 2 fights, you were at the second one. I was at the first fight with Amanda Nunes. She's super competitive in both. If the first fight goes 2 more rounds, Valentina Shevchenko, it probably doesn't need to be 2 more rounds because Valentina Shevchenko beats a tired Amanda Nunes in round 4 or round 5. And we don't get to where we get to. The fight in Edmonton, hella close. If you want to go back and watch it and tell me that it's decisive one way or the other, I'm just going to shake my head at you. It's that competitive. And it will be again, I think. But it's also, it could be, maybe not, the other way, where Shevchenko is just that much better because of what I said earlier, because of what we've all said about her here. She just keeps getting better. She just keeps improving. There is no regression. And so I think Harry and I were talking about this morning, kind of offline. The thing that keeps her from feeling stale and feeling like somebody that we need to see the next step from is that she is going out and having these performances where she absolutely beats the face off of these women that deign to challenge her. And now she has that possibility of going up and facing someone either that she has a history with in Amanda Nunes and is the one person in the UFC that has beaten her, or somebody that she's already dominated. Like, I think we forget how good she looked in that fight against Juliana Pena. It's kind of like the Holly Holm fight, right? You asked where she fits in sort of the pantheon of things. Because she's got those losses to Nunes, it's hard to put her ahead of Nunes. But boy, I may sit here and try to make the case if you let me, because she's just been that good, right? If your 2 losses are ultra close losses and you've beaten Holly Holm and you've beaten Juliana Pena and you've done what you've done at Flyweight, she's got to be top 3. Oh, and then maybe 2, maybe 1. Like, it just depends where you want to put Ronda Rousey. It depends how you want to grade out the fights with Amanda Nunes. But she is, I mean, it's wild to me that we don't talk about her with even more reverence that we do, because she is that fucking good.
I feel that if she does decide to make the move up and she does get that 135-pound title, that, man, that's as good as argument as you're ever going to get for her to be the greatest of all time. You know, whether if she goes up and beats Nunes or whether she goes up and beats Pena, whoever is there. She already beat Pena, of course, but, you know, we're talking, you know, if Pena is the fighter that we're thinking that she is, she's gone to the next level. You know, Daniel mentioned there that he would consider it as a red flag that she's going up. I wouldn't consider that at all. I mean, Valentina is 34 years of age now. She has nothing to prove at 135 pounds, and she has everything to prove at 135 pounds. She wins this fight, we could be talking champ versus champ at the end of the year, and that brings big money, that brings a lot of eyes, and that brings a lot of greatness to whoever wins that fight as well. Sean, you have something? I
think it's a question of could. I think it's we will be.
Yeah,
I think as soon as Nunes and Pena is settled, that's where we're going.
Yeah, it's likely that's happening for sure. Sean?
I think unless she beats Amanda Nunes, you know, Nunes has beaten her twice. We can't deny that. And okay, Nunes has beaten Pena, but that loss will come for Valentina Shevchenko too. You know, it will. It comes for all of us. It didn't come for Khabib because he went running back to Russia, but it'll come for it'll come for everyone. It'll come for everyone. It'll eventually come for her. So that's around the corner. But I would love it. Look, you know, there are certain, as a journalist, independent of bias, you don't want to hope anyone wins. But God Almighty, as someone who loves MMA, I kind of hope she wins, and I kind of hope Amanda Nunes wins, and I kind of hope we see that fight again, because that's the sort of fight. I went on a rant there the other day giving out about rematches, but that's a rematch we've been waiting long enough to see, and I think we do need to see it. But having said that as well, there's a fight this Saturday night, and there's someone who's 19-1, and she should be respected. She's a good fighter. She is a very, very, very good fighter, and I did a post this week about the division, and you talked about the division there, and maybe Valentina leaving it. Myself and Spencer did the State of the UFC only a couple of weeks ago, and we discussed it as well. The division is actually really good now, you know, if you took Valentina out of it. There's a lot of very evenly matched women in that division. And look, exactly, it's funny, we have the 2 title fights this weekend. We have a division which John Jones has vacated. And look at Blachowicz has become a bit of a star who people respect a lot, beat Adesanya. Look where Glover is now. Yuri could be crowned you know, the champion this weekend and could be the next star. Look at myself and Ian, our guy Jamahal Hill on the way up, or Ankalaev maybe, or Paul Craig maybe, even if he can get a few wins. It could be the same for Casey O'Neill or for Tracy Cortez or whoever it might be at the 125-pound division. I love Viviana Araujo. I think she would be the champion if they won, and that's just my personal takes. You know, Mano Firo might be the person, and the problem is when Valentina Shevchenko is there, it's you can't say any of that because it's like, well, Shevchenko's just going to beat him. But if Shevchenko moved, had a massive fight against Amanda Nunes, suddenly you have this very even division full of actually pretty good fighters who now look way better because they don't have someone saying, well, they're shit because she's there, you know? So
similar enough to the flyweight division when Demetrius Johnson's kind of left. The kind of similar.
I was actually thinking that because, and for a different reason, she's a bit like Demetrius in that her wins are kind of written off because she's just fighting the next flyweight contender. Talia Santos is a good fighter, and other people who she fought are good fighters as well. Just like Henry Cejudo is a good fighter, or Haraguchi is a good fighter, whoever it might be. She deserves more praise, and she's very good. But also respect to Talia Santos, and like I just think I said it earlier on, but that 1-2 down the middle, if she can catch her and continue to catch her 1-2s down the middle. If, as the commentator said there, maybe Valentina is thinking about Amanda Nunes. Maybe she's thinking about a fight in December. Well, I'll tell you what, she's a fight in fucking June coming up against someone who doesn't lose very much. And she needs to concentrate on that because look at Amanda Nunes. You go in against someone vastly inferior to you and you end up getting beaten because your head's not in it and maybe you're not in it correctly. Now, I don't think that'll be the case for Shevchenko, but what if it is? What if it is?
What if it is indeed? That kind of rounds us up for the co-main
Santos,
event.
round 1 knockout.
Get on. The flyer of the week for Sean Sheehan is Santos round 1 knockout. We've been stung before with bets, guys, and I'd say we'd be stung again if we were to go down that way. But we'll move on to the next fight, which is an absolute banger. Banger alert. Put the sirens up. The banger alert is on. 2020, we've seen Zhang Weili and Joanna Jędrzejczyk go to absolute war. It was a fight, looking back at it and remembering it, was that it was about as technical as it could be for about a half a round, and then both these women just decided to say, fuck it, let's throw some leather. I think I should try and get one of those into every preview show now. I mean, Harry, I'm going to go to you straight away to break this fight down for us. The first fight, an amazing fight, one of the greatest fights of all time. People are calling it the greatest women's fight of all time. I'm calling it one of the greatest fights of all time. These women left it all on the line. It was the last time that we've seen Joanna Jędrzejczyk inside the cage. She's been away for 2 years now. And that may play a big factor into this fight. I know Zhang Weili has been in again with 2 fights with Rose Namajunas. Second fight, a really close contest with Rose. How do you see the second fight here shaping up between the two?
So that's a good question. I've just recorded an hour-long one-man booth on exactly this. So it's very, very fucking fresh in my mind, lads. So if we've got an hour, I'll just repeat the same thing over and over again.
I love it.
No, look, the first fight was an absolute war. The first fight, I'm going to slightly disagree with you. I think it's the most technical war we have seen in a long time. It was not like Almeida Trezano. It was 2 ladies who knew exactly the reactions that they should be getting and firing absolutely gargantuan missiles at each other based on the right reactions. We're not seeing chins in the air. We're seeing the tiniest of traps and mistakes and footwork being punished by other mistakes. I tell you, I watched it 4 or 5 times in the last couple of weeks and I took something completely different from it every single time. It was an absolutely brilliant fight. My analysis boiled down into a couple of sentences is this. If Joanna Jędrzejczyk is going to win, she has to fight the perfect fight. What she was able to get success with against Weili Zhang was countering the counter. What do I mean by that? I mean that she throws a jab in the pocket, gets out of the way. Weili throws, as that's her tendency to do. She likes to throw in combination. Joanna needs to counter those counters. Weili Zhang hits harder. On the judges' scorecards, she will score preferentially for that reason. This is a 3-round fight. Joanna Jędrzejczyk does not have the time that she had in the last fight to wear Weili Zhang down. Weili only started to really fade the last sort of 25 to 30 seconds of the 3rd round. So if we're looking at this coming in now, Weili Zhang has zero cardio problems. She can go to war for 2.8 rounds and be grand, right? Is Joanna Jędrzejczyk going to knock you out inside then? Probably not. She hit her with the best shot of the entire fight. That up kick, the left high kick, rocking her, dived in with a headbutt straight afterwards, and Weili was grand, right? Came out in the third round quicker and harder than the second round. For Weili Zhang, she needs to just do more of the same. More of the same. Grapple earlier, right? Joanna Jędrzejczyk has insane takedown defense, insane clinch reversals. However, variety and transitions with variety is the way you win fights. If I'm Weili Zhang, I'm continuing to put my foot on the gas. I'm continuing to land hard shots. I'm continuing to score with the judges, and I'm making Joanna Jędrzejczyk think. I'm making Joanna Jędrzejczyk make the same footwork mistakes and square her hips up in the same way she did in the first fight, and I'm blasting the fuck out of her.
There you go, Andy Stevenson with the comment. I mean, Harry, there's going to be no figuring out process in this fight. They've been in there, they've done 5 rounds, so it's going to be off to the races from the get-go here, which
I'd say so.
We'll give it. One thing I wanted to say was Daniel's comment that Joanna hasn't made 115 in 2 years. That is a big thing. And I actually watched, I can't remember what I watched. Maybe it was Embedded, but I saw Joanna and Shevchenko beside one another. And
it's different,
Joanna was a monster in comparison to Shevchenko. And Shevchenko was fighting a weight class above Joanna. And that amazed me. So fingers crossed everything goes well on the scales for Joanna.
I'll
Sean,
say...
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one thing. Like, yes, Joanna has been out for 2 years, and I think that's an interesting wrinkle. I didn't want to say it there because obviously one of the other lads is going to pick that up. But my one question is, Joanna has renegotiated a deal, so we think, right? I think that for Joanna, she's had long enough out and long enough to get her body ready for 115 that this shouldn't be a problem. She's also, let's be honest, she is a professional. She's a consummate professional. I don't think weight will be a problem, but making weight for the first time in 2 years may have one of two effects. It may be that your body is like, fuck this, we're not doing it again. Or her body may have recovered, her metabolism may have recovered, her endocrine systems may have recovered enough that she can make the weight with, not ease, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, indeed. Another thing that kind of was like thinking, and all of that is what you said is very true. She has her finger in a lot of pies right now. She's talking business deals.
She won't be making 115, so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get the drums out. I'm wondering what her outside of the cage antics and her other distractions, are they taken away from it? I think the spell out of the cage, she said she has been training for this fight since last January. So you'd imagine that she has subtly brought down that weight. She won't have a super big cut this week, but she still looks huge. Sean, what's your thoughts on this fight?
I would tend to agree with Harry on the weight cut thing. That I think she'll be okay is basically my big part of it. I think a bigger issue though is the 2 years out of the cage and a bit of ring rust. And Harry said, as Andy said, he's 1/10 of a Luke Thomas there, watching it 4 or 5 times. I only watched the first 2.5 rounds-ish of this fight because I think, and myself, Ian, and you were going to watch it and do the rewatch this week as well for the fight, but I got the exact same thing Harry got, so it only took me 12 minutes, Harry, you to do it 4 or 5 times. And the reason I did that is exactly what Harry said. It's a 3-round fight. But imagine this, right? Imagine Joanna Jędrzejczyk has a bit of ring rust and she gives up that first round because she has a bit of ring rust. That is a massive, massive issue in a 3-round fight. Now, another massive issue, and Harry hit on the same analysis that I'm going to hit on, but the fact that she proved in that last fight she can go the 25 minutes, even though it maybe got a little bit progressively worse for her as the fight went on the scorecards. And as I said, myself and Ian are going to go on and watch it back this week on the rewatch. But she can now afford to up that pace. It was halfway through, I think, the third round, John Anik said on commentary, Joanna Jędrzejczyk is one of the most high volume fighters in the division, and Zhang Weili is throwing as much as her. Well, that's in a 5-round fight. Imagine what we have in a 3-round fight. And as Harry said as well, the same thing I said on the betting show earlier today that I released, is that the harder shots are going to be from Zhang Weili. If Zhang and Joanna throw the exact same amount of shots over the 3 rounds, who is going to damage more? It's probably going to be Zhang. And who's going to win those rounds? It's probably going to be Weili Zhang because of that. So that's relatively simple analysis on my part. Harry's going to do an hour breaking that all down in more detail. But look, when I'm looking for who I think will win the fight, I think that's probably the key to it. Now, one last part, and I'll throw it back to you again, Ian. You could throw it over Spencer. 2 years out of the cage could lead to another thing as well, right? It could lead to a massive change in someone's game. Like, what has she added in? Has she added in a bit of wrestling? Has she added in a big knockout blow with some sort of shot, whether it's a flying knee or a high kick or something like that? Joanna, when we last saw her, was not necessarily changing her game, but I think she was adjusting her game a little bit. And when I look at Joanna, right, maybe this is wrong now, but I see a little bit like the Jose Aldo of women's MMA, but I haven't necessarily seen that adjustment yet, like Jose Aldo has been able to adjust in his fights. If she can adjust and if she can beat Zhang Weili after that massive fight and that that loss, like Jose Aldo did when he destroyed Frankie Edgar after getting knocked out in 15 seconds, she can go back. She will fight for the title, as myself and Spencer discussed a couple of weeks ago, and I think we will all agree she'll probably win it. And it's massive. This is a massive fight for Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Absolutely massive. Zhang Weili has they both can come back again, but Zhang Weili has a long career ahead of her. It's going to be tough. What is it, 3 losses in a row if she loses here? But she can come back. She's a very, very good fighter. And I'd be very surprised if she didn't fight for a title again. For Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she's had the title, she's held the title, she's lost the title, and she's struggled when she's got back into that range. This is her opportunity to win one hard fight and have an easy, probably, title fight in to take it back. Massive.
It's crazy to think, maybe I'll just talk about your point about changing things up, and something that I would like maybe for her to add into her game, Joanna, is that, you guys are spot on in saying that the more impactful shots will more than likely come from Zhang Weili. I feel that if we get into those clinch positions, if Joanna brings some elbow work into her game and maybe land some elbows on the inside and come in and land impactful shots, I don't think she has the ability to land impactful punches. She lands, but not impactfully. But I think if they do find themselves in the clinch work, going back to, was it the Jessica Penne fight or was it the Carla Esparza fight, where she was landing those elbows, and she used to land those elbows, and she cut Penne's nose up real bad with those elbows. So that might be a kind of a thing that she could bring into her game to kind of
like Aldo's leg kick. So is it Joanna's elbows?
Exactly. Bring him back. Bring him back. Exactly. But Spencer, it's crazy to think that, we could very well be in a position after this fight where we're going to scoot and roll back the years back to 2015 and have Carla Esparza versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk for the title. No one would have predicted that 1 year ago even. I think it's crazy that it could happen again down the line.
So first thing, everybody go and sign up for the Patreon. Listen to Harry's one-man booth later on this week when it comes out. Sign up for the Patreon, you cowards. The best content in the game from these lads right here. It's cheaper than a pint, as Shawnee will tell you. Just do it, okay? It's not just because I'm here. It's because it's the truth. Secondly, what you said there at the end, if you'd have told me a year ago, 2 years ago, that we could very well get Carla Esparza as champion defending against Joanna Jędrzejczyk as challenger in 2022 or 2023, I'd have called you crazy and booked every bet you wanted to make about that, and then I would owe you a whole lot of money right now. The things that I'm interested in with this fight that all of you guys have sort of touched on, or the pieces of what you guys have touched on that really interest me. The change part of Joanna's game absolutely could happen. I don't know if she is that person that is going to spend those 2 years away making a big fundamental change. But good Lord, Shawnee mentioned Jose Aldo's leg kicks. Use them. Use them. Use them early, use them often. She had success with them in the first fight and didn't really use them beyond kind of the first round. Use them. Come out, cut down some of that power, cut down some of that movement, take away some of that stability, make her think about more things than just your hands. So use the elbows as well. The other part, and I hate saying this, but it's a thing I think about a lot. Training for this fight since last January and being in the gym and all of those things are great. They're wonderful. I don't think she's going to have a problem with the weight, but it is not the same as being in there. And that's just That's the part that makes the time away. Whether you believe in ring rust or don't, like Dominic Cruz, it's the actual being live with someone that isn't your training partner, that isn't somebody that's just looking to, you know, get the work in. And yep, you both want to get good work in. But on Saturday night, this woman wants to run through you and get back to the title that she lost. She's already been in there and knows that she can literally blow up your forehead with punches. She is going to try to do it again. And there is no one in Coconut Creek that has been trying to inflict that kind of damage on Joanna Jędrzejczyk for the last 2 years and change since this last fight. And that's the piece that in a 3-round fight, where, as we've all kind of touched on, they can both go out there and sprint. That's the piece that becomes the tricky part for her, is can she dial it up right away from the word go when we know Weili Zhang can?
It's going to be fascinating to see. I cannot wait to see this fight. It's going to be an absolute belter. And the next one is going to be a pretty good fight as well. And that's Rogerio Bontorin versus Manuel Cape in the flyweight division. You know, Manuel Cape has come in, has had a mixed bag, a couple of impressive knockout wins, a couple of missed weights, a failed drugs test, a couple of flashy knockouts. And now he's back. He's he's kind of that failed drugs test got squashed. He's back now.
Fuck you, Sada.
Yeah,
fuck him.
The golden snitch couldn't catch him. So he's back in action against Rogerio Bontorin. You know, it's a tough test for Cape, this, I think. You know, you're looking at Bontorin's record. He's lost his last 4, but he's a tough guy in the division. But it's, you know, it's a guy who's on a losing streak, but it's still a name, and it's a worthy task for Cape. Harry, I'm going to go straight to you to give us the crux of this fight, please.
I think Cape is too slick. I think he's too fast, and I think he hits too hard. Now, okay, Zhalgas Shimagulov is not Rogerio Bontorin, but allow me for 1 second. Zhalgas has a pace, he can wrestle, and he's tough. And Cape, for the most part, made it look like a sparring session until eventually he started to turn up the heat and crack him. I think one of the really impressive things about Cape is his footwork and his distance management. One of the flaws in his games is sometimes I question the mentality he goes into fights with. In the Zhalgas fight, he left himself in the pocket a little too often. Zhalgas cracked him a couple of times, and Cape then smiled and was like, oh, okay, shit. If I keep being a dickhead, he's going to hurt me. That's not a position you want to be in with somebody like Rogerio Bontorin, because he has the ability to shoot in and get to your hips. He has the ability to land a shot. He has the ability to make things ugly and awkward for you. And I think with Cape, he is really good at being a hammer, but I question whether he's as good as being a nail, right? And if you allow Rogerio Bontorin to go out there and just grapple the hammer from you for a moment, he's going to do his best. He's going to put both hands on it. He's going to white knuckle ride it, and he's going to slam it into the top of your head. This is a fight for me that's not about technical skills, but is about mental skills. If Cape goes in and is dialed in from moment numero uno all the way through, I could see him taking Bontorin out of there. I think, as I said, he'll be too slick, he'll be too fast, and he'll be too technical. But if he doesn't, and we see Rogerio Bontorin start to have some confidence, Bontorin has no problem being the nail for a little while, because he's going to find that hammer and he's going to cave your skull in. So, I mean, that's my read of the fight. I think it's going to be an interesting fight for the mental aspect, less so for the technical aspect. Not sure. The technical aspect is going to be bad. You know?
I think that if Cape comes in here and is at the best of his abilities, we could see something similar along the lines of the Kai Kara-France fight for Bontorin, where, you know, there's a couple of exchanges, but then at the end, he ultimately ended up on the wrong end of the Kai Kara-France. I'm interested to see if he can get Cape down. If he can get Cape down, it's a super interesting fight. Not too sure he can. I mean, I was super excited about Cape coming into the UFC. Sean, he looked like a monster in Rising before he came over here. He's moved down in weight now, of course. But he has some great wins against Kai Asakura and Takeya Mizugaki and stuff like that in Rising. I was excited. Got off to a pretty bad start. 2 losses against Pantoja and Mateus Nicolau, 2 great fighters as well. But the dust is settled, like I said at the start, and he's starting to look like a definite contender. And he's with an impressive win here. We could be talking about championship material, couldn't we?
We could. And I think they would want him to be in that position as well, you know, because he is a guy who the fans like, you know, he is a guy who's exciting, big knockouts. He's from Portugal as well, you know, and people love if a country can get behind someone, and he does, you know, the Ronaldo thing and everything. So that's great. I think did you? I thought you just moved your camera out there. That was a very good like backwards move there to fucking. It's like, you know, them stairs you like walk up and then you actually like walk down. I don't know. Anyway,
he's slick on the mat and slick on the camera as well as our Harry.
He is right. Do you know what I think the key area to this fight is, right? It's that moment when the counter shot is thrown, because Bontorin, if he's given an opportunity, will take him down, right? He'll push him against the cage. We talked earlier about, you can't push him against the cage. You need takedowns in the middle of the cage. Doesn't matter for Bontorin. If he gets a hold of you, he will push you against the cage, and then you lift you up, and he'll fuck you down on top of your head, and you'll get fucked up. And I actually think he's probably better against the cage in some aspects. Maybe Harry will disagree with me, but it's, yeah. Anyway, no, you want? Okay. I think that area, right, is where Bontorin will attack to get those takedowns to win the fight on the ground. But that's also the area which Manel Cape will attack, try to draw Bontorin in so he can counter him in that area to land the big shots to knock him out. So that one area there in the middle of the cage, when it's a win for one of them, it's a very easy fight to break down for me. Now, maybe something else, like maybe Bontorin come in and knock him out or something. But that to me is the area where this fight will be won or lost. If Cape can make him pay when countering and avoid, more importantly even, avoid the takedown, avoid the clinch, avoid getting slammed, he'll win this fight all day. He might win a decision, but he's going to counter him. He'll probably knock him out because he has great power. But if he can't, he'll be pushed against the cage, he'll be taken down, and he'll almost certainly lose. He might get, subbed or whatever it might be. I just feel like Bontorin's striking is so bad compared to Cape's that it's like Anthony Pettis sometimes. Maybe Cape is that guy. You know, you're almost saying, fucking don't do that. You know, don't make that mistake. Use what you're great at right there. Don't get smart. Don't make this fucking stupid decision to make the wrong move at the wrong time. Bide your time, pick the shot, land the shot, and win the fight. If he throws too many shots, too many counters, it'll be a bad night for him because he will get put down. I think he really needs to pick that shot, but be very, very careful about it.
Yeah,
fly in, knee, or we riot.
Yeah,
could be. It really could be.
Yeah. I mistakenly said that Bontorin had lost his last 4, but he has one win in between against Matt Schnell.
Matt Schnell. You smell Matt
need
Schnell. I need that on the fucking soundboard there. Hold on, we'll go for a different one set.
I love it. Spencer, the guys have talked about it already, and the defining factor of this fight for me is that knockout power of Manuel Cape. You know, if he doesn't get the knockout, he is going to be landing impactful blows. And, you know, having that ability, especially as a flyweight, is super important in him being successful in this fight.
It absolutely is. The biggest part, and if you go back and look at those first 2 losses, the biggest change or the most important thing for him in this fight, any fight going forward, is just activity. He spent those first 2 fights being too hesitant, allowing just trying to look for the perfect shot, and allowed Pantoja to dictate terms, allowed things to be super close with Matthias Nicolau, and then gets to the end of the fight and goes, what do you mean I didn't win? He then turns around and goes out and starts throwing shots and getting after it, and look what happens. Great things. Now, to me, this is as much of a must-win for a guy on a 2-fight winning streak as I think there can be, just because he has talked so much shit about his place in the division, right? Kai Kara-France gets that win over Askar Askarov. First guy to beat Askar Askarov. And here comes Manel Cape out of nowhere that says, Pantoja gets the next title fight. Kai should fight me because I fought Pantoja pretty even. 1, you didn't. You lost, clearly. 2, he just beat a guy that no one else has beat. Sit the fuck down. Go beat a top 10 fighter. That's this moment. This is the most favorable matchup he can get against a top 10 opponent. So go out there and do it. That's not to say Bontarine doesn't have path to victory, because as everybody said, he will scoop you up and deposit you on your head and spend 4 or 5 minutes just grinding you out on the mat, happily hammering you with short shots, looking for chokes, all of that stuff. But this is the one he needs to win. And he needs to win it emphatically. He wants that night. He wants to get in that title mix. The UFC wants him in that title mix. He's clearly a guy that they brought in and that they see some promise in. I'm not looking forward to Daniel Cormier singing his praises like he's an absolute, like he's just a world beater when he hasn't beaten anybody yet in the UFC. Nothing, no shade to Kai Asakura.
Mind your anti-European bias there. Wait.
No shade
Canadian
to Kai no shade to Kai Asakura. But this is the one where set all the talk aside, set all the histrionics aside, set all the I should be and I am and all. Just go out and do it. Go out and beat this dude in the first round, put the same performance on you've put the last 2 fights, and then I will give it to you. I will give you a spot in the top 5 and a rematch with Pantoja or Nicolau or somebody in that mix. But you got to go out and do it. And if he doesn't, got to just end up being quiet, son.
Imagine Cape versus Figueiredo. What a fucking fight that'd be.
Oh, my God. Like that's the thing. Too,
Figueiredo
right?
whacks him.
There's so many really interesting fights and really entertaining fights. Go out and win this one so we get them. Whatever it is next, it's entertaining. Just shut up and do it, though.
Stop.
I feel like he's gotten under your skin there a little bit, Spencer.
It drives me insane.
I haven't heard any of it. I don't hear it. I love not hearing this stuff.
So part of it is that I talked to him before his debut, right? And going into the fight with Pantoja, he says, look, end of this year, I'm the champion. It's not even difficult. I wax this guy, I beat somebody else, and then I get the belt. And he goes out in the first 2 fights. And as I said, he loses close fights, and then he stands there and goes, what do you mean? Okay, you've reset, you've got the wins. Go win the one that mattered. It's great to talk a big game, but if you can't win the ones that matter, I don't want to hear from you.
Indeed. You heard him. Stop saying, start doing. The man knows what he's talking about right down there. Let's round off the main card. I'm going to go straight to you, Harry. Jack Della Maddalena is a guy that has featured for you on the Severe Spotlight. You can catch Harry's Severe Spotlight every Monday after UFC events where he highlights one fighter's performance on each card. And Jack caught your eye on what towards his last fight, or the fight before, I believe. What makes him such a special fighter for you?
I just enjoy the way that he cerebrally approaches his striking. It's very fluid. His range management is really interesting and really diverse. He's able to slip and roll and move in and out of the pockets, and he's going to hurt you when he is there. He's a big rhythm fighter, but he doesn't take long to find that rhythm. And that, I think, is a big thing when it comes to, 1, any fighter, but 2, a fighter at the highest level like you are in the UFC. One thing that we saw in the Losa fight is maybe he doesn't have amazing technical proficiency on the ground, but I have an ability to scratch that away, as it seemed like his foot was pretty fucked up when he fell over. And if you have one foot, trying to find your way out of grappling positions is a tough ask. So let's pump the brakes slightly and let's see what he looks like in this out. But his fight against that fella that they took off the bin line and chucked him into the cage, he styled on, as he should have. This in Ameev is an interesting matchup. Ameev isn't the best athlete. Shawnee mentioned that, and I think that sort of resounded and rung a bell in my head outside of the podcast. But if Ameev manages to get him down and holds him down, and our concerns about Della Maddalena's get-up game from the actual bottom, if that is proven to be lacking, it's going to be a long night for him. But his ability to scramble, his ability to get back to his feet in pure wrestling exchanges is pretty good. And when he stays on the feet and he finds his rhythm, he's a problem.
Does Ameev stand any chance, in your opinion, to take this fight? He's going to be looking to take it down. I mean,
Absolutely, he can take this fight. Absolutely. Get him down, test him on the ground, wear out the gas tank. One thing that Della Maddalena hasn't shown is he hasn't shown a deficiency in his gas. He's been able to go and go and go, and he's looked pretty good in doing it. But the more that you force somebody to carry your weight, regardless of who you are, you're draining the gas tank. There's no fighter in the world that has unlimited gas. Everyone has an energy bar, and the more that you force that person to carry weight, get back up, carry weight, get back up, drag his hips back, get back up, you're draining that energy bar. So if Ameev can get him down once and Maddalena struggles to get back up, that's when this fight gets interesting if you're in Ameev's corner. But I think if he stays on the feet, it's going to be a tough night.
Indeed. Anybody? We're getting on up in the time now. So if anyone has
just a quick one on that, I think on Ameev, we know what he is, right? I said on the podcast this week, I always mix him and Imavov up for some reason. So I went back and I watched him. He's an okay fighter. He's a brilliant fighter for middleweight because middleweight's so shit, but he's okay. He can wrestle well. He can strike well. He does it all pretty well. Not amazing in anywhere. Will never be a champion, probably. I don't know about Della Maddalena yet. I just don't know. He could be great. He really could be. And I think this is actually a very good fight to show if he is very good. If he beats him and beats him well and styles on him, I think it's a very good fight. And I think the key to this fight, in my opinion anyway, is Della Maddalena needs to push him back with his striking. And I'm not saying like just pressure him all the time, but don't let him get started with his offense. Ameev is a very technical fighter, but very, very much a setup fighter. He likes to set everything up to land it, whether it's a takedown or whether it's whether it's a punch. Break that rhythm. Be first. If Della Maddalena is first in this fight, I think he'll knock him out. If he's not, I think he'd probably get taken down and he'd probably get beaten there. But it's a big proving fight for Della Maddalena. Ameev has proved what he is, and I think we know that. We will know it. But we could see. And another thing about Della Maddalena, he's never been tested against anyone of note. All of his fights inside the UFC, Luce is not a bad fighter, but inside the UFC, outside of the UFC, he's never met anyone near what Ameev is. And if he beats him, he could rise through the division, and we will see on Saturday.
Indeed. Spencer, any thoughts to add to that?
I mean, the couple quick points is just that, as good as Ramazan Ameev has been, he's 20-5 in his career. The two fighters he's lost to in the UFC are probably the two most known and most established guys that he's lost to. And with all due respect to Danny Roberts and Anthony Rocco Martin, still not that great of a fighter. Still kind of just mid-pack welterweights. I tend to think that Jack Zella can be better than that. This is why I want to see it. I think the UFC thinks he can be better than that. He was originally booked to face Warley Alves in his debut. When you get those kind of fights at this kind of time, it tells you that everybody is interested and wants to see it. We all want to see it. The thing I think that makes him very dangerous in this fight is that he flows from southpaw to orthodox without losing any momentum, without losing any skill, without losing any weapons at his disposal. And when you can constantly be cutting angles and constantly be changing direction against a guy that needs to come forward in straight lines to get your hips and get you on the ground, and you're smashing him with good shots, with power from both sides, and you can mix in a kick here and there if you get it back real quick and don't get caught and taken down. I just think there's the opportunity, as Harry said, for this to get real bad for Ameev real quick.
Indeed. It'll be interesting to see. That fight opens up the main card for the pay-per-view. We're going to shoot through the prelims fights super quick. I'm going to go straight to this fight. Portugal are out in force on this card. I'm wondering, is this the first time there's been two Portuguese fighters fighting on the one UFC card? It'd be interesting to find that out. I don't remember it happening before, but I could be wrong. But it seems like we're talking about Andre Fialho almost every preview now, because he's back in again. It's his fourth fight in around 5 months or less. He's going in here against Jake Matthews. I know, Sean, you're very high on Andre Fialho as a fighter. I am too. I really love his fight style. I really love that he's getting it in and getting those fights under his belt, and he wants to compete. I know the UFC loves that as well. This is another kind of a showcase fight for him too, if we're being real as well, isn't it, Sean? I
wouldn't go that far. I have great respect for Jake Matthews. I think he's a good fighter. It's it's a good fight on short notice at this level. If Jake Matthews won this fight, I'd be surprised, absolutely. But he's a good fighter. Don't get me wrong. Like, Jake Matthews is one of those fighters. I was talking about it earlier today, where he came into the UFC, right? He had a little bit like, say, someone like an Eric Silva. Even he had this big reputation. He's going to be the next guy. He was a young up and coming prospect, and now he's 27, right? And he's 17-5. Not a bad record, but he's a good fighter. He just hasn't really kicked on. Like, could Jake Matthews have a late kind of, renaissance in his career? Like, could he do something like a Bisping, or could he do something like a Charles Oliveira or something like that? People who come in, like Bisping was 15-0, and then he kind of like, Bisping's, he's going to be a good guy, but he's never going to be that guy. Maybe that will happen. No, maybe it won't. I would say it probably won't, but he could be. But he's a good, solid fighter is what he is right now. I just think Andre Fialho is special now. And he's in a part of his career where he is going to prove if he is special at a certain level. But I really like him. I always, I mentioned McGregor a couple of times, but I compare him to McGregor a lot because there's very few fighters who actually fight in a pressuring, countering way. Very few fighters can cut off the cage so well that they force their opponents to come out and leave openings for counters. That's exactly the way Andre Fialho is. He's a very, very technically good fighter. He hits hard. He's willing to take fights on short notice. He wants to push himself. He wants to be a star. He wants to fight good guys. He wants to fight good names. And he's a very, very good fighter. And I know maybe Spencer will come in here and go, slow the roll and all of this. But you know what? He's 20 fights into his career. He's a little bit older than some guys coming through. He shouldn't be trying to slow it at all. He should be trying to get another fight before Christmas, or maybe 2 more fights before Christmas, and keep this truck on the fucking road and keep going and ride it until he gets as far as he can get. Because he is a guy. Sometimes we see guys come into the UFC, right, and they're 7 or 8 fights into their career and they're just not ready yet. An Edmund Shabazian or someone like that. And sometimes we see guys coming into the UFC and they are in their prime. They're ready to fight good guys like Michel Pereira. He came in on short notice, fought Michel Pereira, put on a great fight with him. He just beat Ponzinibbio a couple of weeks ago. That puts him in the top 15. That's the level I think Fialho's at. He's now coming in against Jake Matthews, who's probably a top 25, top 20 fighter in that division. If he can beat him, he'll go on again. Big fan, massive fan of Andre Fialho, but I like Jake Matthews as well, and I wouldn't show him any disrespect.
As am I. You trying to suggest I was disrespecting?
That's when I said it. It sounded like that, but I actually didn't mean that. Sorry for disrespecting you, Ian. I don't disrespect.
Spencer, are you as high on Andre Fialho? Do you like his mentality? Do you like him getting in there and competing against some good, solid guys? I know the UFC love it. UFC will try and look after him to the best of their ability. When they have an active guy, an exciting fighter that's looking to fight, they'll stick him in with fights. And, I can understand why Sean said that about Jake Matthews as well. I didn't mean any disrespect to him. I mean, he's a good, solid fighter, but what the UFC is looking for here is Fialho to come in and blow him out of the water. Jake Matthews is a well-known guy, is a tough fighter, but if we're talking about Fialho the way we are talking about him, that's the expectation here, for me at least anyway, that he comes in and gets a good, solid win over Jake Matthews.
I mean, I think it's the expectation of the UFC. I think it's the expectation of most fans and observers as well. Given what he's done, given as Shawnee said, he came in on short notice in January and gave Michel Pereira a tough fight. That tells you the level that he's at. I'm a little bit concerned about 3 fights in 3 months when he's jumping up a level here against Jake Matthews. He got touched a little bit in the Cameron Van Camp fight. Cameron Van Camp doesn't have the skills experience to put him away. That said, Jake Matthews comes out in the last day or two and says, like, I'm looking to go out there and put on a striking display. No, dude, this is where you need to wrestle. This is where you need to use your Brazilian jiu-jitsu that you've been doing since you were like 13 years old or younger, and be the better athlete and put him on his ass and just wrestle. Yes, as Daniel Edwards says, he didn't finish Diego Sanchez, but he sure as hell kept him on the mat for 15 minutes and didn't let him do anything. And that's the recipe here. To Shawnee's point about Jake being, been around for a while and can he have a renaissance? Every single fighter that's a champion in the UFC right now is above 30 years old. So as much as we look at these young kids, and Jake Matthews has been in the UFC since he was 19 years old, he's just now hitting that sort of athletic prime start to really put it all together. I don't know that he does. I don't know that he necessarily gets there, but he fought pretty level with Sean Brady for a couple rounds before Brady kind of turns it up and dominates. And we all think exceptionally highly of Sean Brady. I wouldn't be shocked if Jake Matthews wins this fight. I don't think he does, because I think he goes out there and does the dumb thing and tries to stand with Andre Fiallo and gets pieced up in the first round. And Fiallo gets another win and says, get me on that card at the end of July. And Dana absolutely loses his shit and gets him on the fight card at the end of July. And we see this dude reset the record in 7 months for the most fights in a UFC calendar year. But I think this is a closer fight and can be a more competitive fight than people think if Jake Matthews makes the right decisions.
It will be interesting to see. Harry, do you have anything to add onto this fight? What's your consensus heading into this one?
My consensus is that Shawnee had the audacity to pick fucking Miguel Baeza, and I'm still fucking salty about it. But look, I echo.
He'll come good
too.
Yeah, what he fuck.
Amen.
Somebody else, Shawnee will tell me that Magomed Ankalaev won't be a champion, and I'll fucking hit the roof. Fuck, stop it. Yeah, look,
I'm gonna smash him.
My consensus is the same as what you guys have said. Really, I think that the ceiling that Fiallo has seemingly looks higher, but it's not until we see him against guys like Jake Matthews that we're really going to know. I echo the sentiments that Spencer says. 3 fights in as many months against easier competition, in the step back against Van Camp, whatever, that's fine. But going in against a Pereira and, getting touched in that 3rd round, he didn't not get touched against Baeza, and the same then he's getting clipped a little bit against Van Camp. Those are, those sorts of shots will add up. That sort of damage will add up. Sorry. You need to slow the roll slightly just in terms of looking after your health. But obviously for Fiallo, the absolutely perfect thing is he goes out, Jake Matthews says, oh no, I'm going to strike with him. He whacks him in a round and he does what Sean said, gets on the mic, screams down it and says, look lads, get me on this fucking card. Give me whoever. And Dana will give him some fucking tomato can and get another 1st round finish and would be grand. But I agree. Sean Brady has ways to win this fight. Sean Brady definitely has ways to win that fight, by the way. But Jake Matthews has ways to win this fight. He has ways to make this fight very interesting. I'm not sure I see it because Jake Matthews doesn't seem to be the smartest fighter, but he certainly has ways to make this interesting and make it a test for Fiallo.
Harry, I'll keep it you real quickly. Talk to me about Brendan Allen versus Jacob Malkoun, prelims headliner in the middle of the division.
Striker that's sort of okay, but a bit of a meathead versus a grappler that doesn't have a lot of experience in the UFC. We'll find out very quickly which one's better. Done.
Boom. Spencer, take us through the rest of the undercard. Anything to add there, Sean? No?
No, I'm just hoping I wasn't getting any of those.
Yeah, no. I saw you turning your head there. Sean, talk to me about Jocelyn Edwards versus Ramona.
Too great. Fair play to them. Congratulations.
Spencer, do us the pleasure, please, of giving us a quick breakdown of the rest of the undercard, if you may.
So the closing fight, Sung Woo Choi and Josh Kulibao, should be entertaining. Two featherweights that just like having action fights, right? Kulibao has a draw with Charles Jourdain 2 fights back, got a win last time out. He's one of those guys that's in a weird spot where he's got 1 win in 3 fights, but he's also undefeated in his last 2. Sung Woo Choi has never met a fist fight that he doesn't really welcome and enjoy. I echo Harry's sentiments on Brendan Allen and Jacob Malkoun. Brendan Allen's he's just confounding, right? He looks great against the guys that he should look great against, and then he makes stupid decisions against guys that he has to be smart against, and he gets touched up. Malkoun hasn't shown much other than being a good wrestler, a decent wrestler that can just take you down and hold you there. Mahashrate won his fight on Dana White's Contender Series. He's 22 years old. He's got a weird frame. He's kind of got the Dominic Reyes frame without the go-go gadget arms. He's all torso and then short arms. Steve Garcia is kind of just a guy. And so we're gonna find out a little bit about this 22-year-old Chinese fighter. Matthews and Fiallo kickoff. We get to the other ones. Danat Bakdaril Kyung Ho Kang. I'm always up for both of these guys, really. Always entertaining. Dana Becquerel is going to come out looking to take somebody's head off. Kyung Ho Kang maybe wrestles a little bit, but probably doesn't. Makes some bad decisions. The fight that I'm most interested in, really, in the prelims, and it's for purely ridiculous reasons, Sylvana Gomez Juarez has been submitted by armbar in each of her last 2 fights and her 2 UFC appearances. Liang Nia's last 2 wins are both by armbar. 6 of her 19 wins are by armbar. I just want to see if this chick can get armbarred for a 3rd straight fight, because it's been poor decision-making. Like, look, Lupi Godinez is a great fighter. I think she has tons of upside, so I'll give her the pass on the short notice getting armbarred by Lupi. But in the fight against Vanessa Demopoulos, she packed her one right at the start of the fight, like just blasted her, put her on her ass, and it's perfect opportunity to get Demo out of there. And she decides to go to the ground and leave her arms in, and Demopoulos recovers,
don't get me fucking started.
Gets her wits about her, and not only gets her wits about her, but gets a chance to grab a hold and pin an arm and then go up for the, and like, if you're susceptible to armbar, some people are just shitty at defending armbar. She might be one of those people, and I'm ridiculous enough to want to see this early in the fight.
There's one brewing. What is she susceptible to, Sean?
Armbar. There was so many arm bars there. I was like, I'm about to explode here.
I know, I can see you there. You're about to explode there. I have to get one in. Yeah. But that was a lovely breakdown there. And that rounds us off for UFC 275. A fucking stacked card, a really good main card, exciting undercard to look forward to. That rounds us up for this one. We're back next week with some analysis on the UFC Fight Night Cater versus Emmett, a banger in the featherweight division. We're back the week after that for Arman Tsarukyan versus Mateus Gamrot. Unbelievable fight. We're back again the week after that for Adesanya versus Cannonier, and then Dos Anjos versus Fiziev, then Ortega versus Rodriguez. You're going to see a shit ton of us over the next couple of weeks. A lot of great fights incoming. Before we round it out, before we finish it up, head on over there to eatallreal.com. Enter the code word SevereMMA. Get yourself some all real nutrition bars, the best in the market. Do not pay any attention to Sean Sheen down on the bottom left or the bottom right while he's wearing that flag. It's a dirty rag. He's eating the all real nutrition bars. I'd say some of the Limerick hurlers are probably eating the all real nutrition bars as well, given that performance that last weekend.
The only 2 I've left are peanut butter, and I hate peanut butter. So I make all the rest of mine. They're the only ones I've left for the fucking to show them on screen. So Niall, send me out some more there, all real sound.
Get them peanut butter bars into you. They're lovely, as are the cashew ones, as are the chocolate ones, as are the coconut ones. All real nutrition bars. Head on over, eatallreal.com. Enter the code word SevereMMA. We will see you again next week. Enjoy the fights this Saturday night.